President Trump had a short response when he was asked if a ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine would include forcing Kyiv to recognize Russia's illegal seizure of Crimea in 2014. Quote, "I don't care."
Look, I just want to see the war end. I don't care. If they're both happy, they both sign an agreement. I have no favorites. I don't want to have any favorites. I want to have a deal done.
Now, as the president argues that ultimately the recognition of who controls Crimea doesn't matter to him, he does care greatly about reaching a deal to end this war in Ukraine. And we're told he's become increasingly frustrated that a peace agreement has proven so elusive so far, as he is now approaching his 100th day in office. The president told reporters today that he has no favorites when it comes to the outcome here, but he did also criticize President Zelenskyy for being what he said was more difficult to deal with than President Putin.
I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelenskyy, and I hope that Zelenskyy, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelenskyy. So far it's been harder, but that's okay.
The president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who you see here, is also expected to meet one-on-one with the Russian leader for a second time this Friday. This comes as Russian missiles are still striking Kyiv and Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, tonight. As my source to start us off this hour is Trump's former national security advisor, Ambassador John Bolton. And Ambassador, when you hear what the president said about not having favorites here, obviously you served as his national security advisor. I just wonder what you make of that.
Well, of course he's got favorites, and his favorite is not Russia. His favorite is Vladimir Putin, whom he thinks is his friend. Trump has already made major concessions to the Russians. He has said weeks and months ago that he would not support Ukraine being restored to its full sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is a rejection of the U.S. position and the NATO position going back to February 24th, 2022, when the Russians invaded. Trump has said that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO, which is a rejection of the U.S. position since 2008, when George W. Bush first advocated it. He said that there will be no NATO security guarantees. This basically lays down central elements of what Russia already wants, and that has affected the negotiations, which, by the way, have been more about a ceasefire than a permanent peace settlement. A permanent deal is a long way away.
But what do you make of everything you just laid out there? Still hasn't resulted in a ceasefire. Why do you think that is?
Because that amounts to surrender for Ukraine. These are the Russian positions that then give them the basis, after they regroup and rebuild their army, for the third invasion of Ukraine, to finish what Putin and the Kremlin began back in 2005, announcing it publicly to the world that they were about recreating the Russian Empire. And that includes, critically, getting control of Ukraine. This Trump approach to Russia, I think, is a critical mistake for the United States. This will be one of the biggest reversals of policy in history. It will have ramifications for American national security all over the world. And as Trump says, he doesn't really care about it. He just wants to do it to get the war behind him. That's all he really cares about.
What do you make of how it seems he's very frustrated that he's approaching 100 days in office and still there is no agreement, nothing?
Well, in part because he doesn't understand what this war is all about. He has said several times, including in the State of the Union message, he thinks the war is senseless. For very different reasons, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians think that. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and independence. The Russians are fighting to expand the Russian Empire. That's a hard position to compromise, whether Trump thinks it's senseless or not. Anybody who understands this history would appreciate that this is going to be more difficult than Trump and Steve Witkoff think. But if we see these reports turn out to be true, this, by the way, is Witkoff's fourth meeting with Putin on the subject of Ukraine. Witkoff has apparently been urging that sanctions against Russia, and particularly sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, be revoked. This would be a huge further concession to Russia.
Yeah, Politico is reporting that tonight. We haven't confirmed that yet, but as Steve Witkoff is on his way to meet with Putin on Friday in Russia, I want you to listen to what the vice president said about how ready the U.S. is basically to walk away from this.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. And the only way to really stop the killing is for the armies to both put down their weapons, to freeze this thing, and to get on with the business of actually building a better Russia and a better Ukraine.
If the U.S. does walk away, what do you think that means for relations with Russia from the United States perspective? Do they try to normalize them after that and essentially just leave this, or what could that look like?
Yes, I think they leave Ukraine in the dust. When Vance says we're giving Russia and Ukraine terms that they should agree to, he's saying Ukraine should surrender 20% of its territory in response to 2 acts of unprovoked aggression over the last 10 years. This is a roadmap for Red China, Freudian slip, for People's Republic of China to go after Taiwan, to continue to go after the South China Sea, for Russia to take aggression action elsewhere in the territory of the former Soviet Union, and in fact the license for rogue states around the world. It's not necessarily Trump's view, but I think it is Vance's view. This is a significant American retreat from responsibility for its own national security globally.
On one other thing, the president said today no one is asking Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russia's. That was something that President Zelenskyy had said earlier was not going to happen. But the New York Times does report tonight that European officials who have seen this proposed agreement say the U.S. would recognize Crimea as that. And the New York Times pointed out that when Secretary of State Marco Rubio was a senator, he co-sponsored an amendment to block the U.S. from ever recognizing any Russian claim of sovereignty over parts of Ukraine that it has seized.
Yeah, well, Rubio was right the first time. If we recognize the Russian seizure of the Crimea and the annexation is legal, it would not only be contrary to American national security interest, it would be a mark of shame on the administration, on Trump, on Vance, on everybody in the administration who supported it. And it would be an open license for other countries to take aggressive action. I don't think people are focused enough on how the rest of the world will read this. Along with everything else Trump has done, including the tariff war that he's launched against friends and allies, I think people all over America, all over the world, doubt America's word, doubt our extended nuclear deterrent, thus providing an incentive for nuclear proliferation, doubt our word as an ally, thus fragmenting the alliances further, all of which doesn't benefit the United States. It endangers us in a very complex, very dangerous, increasingly threatening world, and the Trump administration does not get it.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for your time tonight.
President Trump weighing in on the war in Ukraine after Trump slammed President Zelenskyy for prolonging the war. That's what he said. Take a listen.
I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelenskyy, and I hope that Zelenskyy, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelenskyy. So far it's been harder, but that's okay.
This after Vice President Vance earlier today kicked the ball to European leaders to be the ones to continue leading the negotiations, adding that he thinks the next phase would be to freeze the current territorial lines where they are now. Now, back in Ukraine, the war has resumed in full force after that brief Easter respite. Today, a Russian drone struck a bus carrying people to work, killing 9, injuring 30, according to the Ukrainian government. Despite all this, British officials say Ukraine talks held in London were, quote, productive and successful, even after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio backed out of attending the talks last minute. Joining us now to talk about all of this, Democratic Congressman from Massachusetts, Jake Auchincloss, who also served as a U.S. Marine in Afghanistan. Congressman, thanks for joining us. So take a listen to President Trump moments ago talking more about why he wants this war to end as soon as possible.
When we have it down to $65 a barrel, it went up to almost $100 a barrel. And at that number, Putin and Russia made a lot of money. So I think one of the reasons, look, I think he has a certain respect for me, but one of the big reasons is oil prices are down. I think this is a good time to get the war settled.
What's your reaction, Congressman?
Putin does not have respect for Donald Trump because Donald Trump negotiates with Russia out of a posture of appeasement, and Putin only respects strength. The way to conduct these negotiations is for the United States to state clearly, here is how we are going to ensure Ukraine's security. We are going to let it use the 300 billion euros in Russian frozen assets to field and equip a 1 million-man army. We are going to guarantee it freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. And it is going to enter the European Union so that it can have an EU rapid response force for security guarantees. That is how you negotiate with Russia, from strength, by declaring Ukraine's security and then seeing what Russia is willing to offer. You do not start the negotiations by giving them everything they asked